I felt it before I heard it. The silence hanging in the air after my daughter finished playing. Melody stood on stage, violin still tucked under her chin, the last note of her composition lingering like a question no one wanted to answer. Her small fingers trembled slightly against the neck of the instrument as she waited for something, anything, but there was nothing. No applause, not even a polite cough. That's when the whisper cut through the quiet from somewhere behind me. That's the poor girl, the one with the single mom. Chen, I think? My chest tightened. I couldn't turn around, couldn't move. My hands gripped the edge of my seat, as if it were the only thing holding me upright. On stage, Melody lowered her violin and gave the small bow we'd practiced in our living room. Her eyes found mine, and I watched her swallow hard, her hopeful smile fading as she realized what was happening. Or rather, what wasn't happening. I should start at the beginning. My name is Olivia Chen, and I've been raising Melody alone since she was 2. We live in Pinewood, a small town in Oregon where people smile at you at the grocery store but whisper when you walk away, the kind of place where half the families have lived here for generations, and the other half are trying to prove they belong. I work as a nurse at the county clinic, taking as many shifts as I can while still being there for Melody. It's not the career I dreamed of in college, but it's steady, and the schedule lets me be home most evenings. As for Melody, she's everything. 10 years old, quiet in a way that makes teachers sometimes forget she's there, but with a mind that never stops working. She doesn't care about the latest YouTube trends or what the popular kids are wearing. Instead, she loses herself in music. Not the pop songs other kids stream, but compositions that sound like they're coming from somewhere deep inside her. She started creating her own melodies when she was 7, recording snippets on my old phone and explaining them to me with a seriousness that made my heart ache. "This one sounds like when you're almost asleep but still thinking," she told me once. "And this part is like when you remember something happy that can't happen again." Last fall, Mrs. Bennett, her music teacher, mentioned that Melody had unusual interpretive abilities and suggested she might benefit from proper instrument training. The school had a limited instrument loan program, but the waiting list was long, and families with demonstrated financial need were often quietly pushed down the list. So I saved, took extra weekend shifts, sold some jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother, and last Christmas, I found her a second-hand violin at a consignment shop, $150, with a case that needed new latches and a G-string that had been replaced. It wasn't much, but when she opened it, Melody looked at me like I'd handed her the moon. She practiced every day after homework, teaching herself through YouTube tutorials and free apps. Mrs. Bennett gave her occasional pointers during lunch breaks, but formal lessons weren't in our budget. Still, something about the violin connected with Melody in a way nothing else had. She'd play for hours, eyes closed, completely absorbed. When the school announced the annual talent showcase, I was surprised when Melody asked to sign up. She'd always been the kind of kid who preferred to observe rather than perform. "Are you sure?" I asked her. "You know how competitive some of the kids get about these things." The showcase wasn't just about talent. It was a social event where certain families showed off not just their children, but their status. Last year's winner had performed a piano piece his private instructor had selected after 3 years of twice-weekly lessons. "I want to play my own piece," Melody said quietly, "the one about the river." I knew the one she meant. She'd been working on it for weeks, a haunting melody that seemed to flow and pause and rush forward like water finding its path. It wasn't flashy or technically impressive by competition standards, but it had something many of the other performances would lack. It had heart. "Okay," I told her, "let's do it." In the weeks before the showcase, I noticed something changing in Melody. She'd always been responsible, but now she approached her music with a new seriousness. She'd wake up early to practice before school. She researched proper posture and breathing techniques. She recorded herself playing and listened critically, making small adjustments. One evening, I overheard her talking to Mrs. Bennett after school. "There's a visiting instructor coming to the showcase," Melody said. "Ms. Larson told us in class. Someone from a music school in Portland." So that explained the extra motivation. I made a mental note to thank Ms. Larson, Melody's classroom teacher, for sharing that information. Even the possibility of being noticed by someone in the music world had lit a fire in my daughter that I hadn't seen before. The night of the showcase, we arrived at the school auditorium 30 minutes early. The place was already buzzing with activity, parents arranging elaborate flower bouquets, kids in formal wear, running through last-minute practices, teachers attempting to create order from chaos. I helped Melody tune her violin in a quiet corner while families streamed in around us. I noticed how some parents nodded briefly in our direction, while others looked through us as if we were invisible. After 3 years at Pinewood Elementary, I was used to it, but tonight it stung a little more than usual. Melody was scheduled to perform 9th out of 16 acts. We sat through a dance routine, a magic act, and several piano performances before her turn. Most received enthusiastic applause, especially Aidan Miller's elaborate piano performance, complete with memorized classical piece and dramatic hand flourishes that his mother documented with a professional-looking camera. When the host finally called Melody's name, I gave her hand a squeeze. "You've got this, sweetheart." She nodded, her face serious as she walked to center stage. The spotlight caught her plain black dress, not new, but carefully pressed, and the violin that wasn't expensive but had been lovingly polished. She adjusted the microphone, positioned her music stand, though I knew she had memorized every note, and then raised her violin to her chin. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, like someone testing cold water with their toe. Then the melody began to unfold, not structured like the classical pieces we'd heard earlier, but something wilder, more organic. It rose and fell like breath, like the river she'd named it after. There were moments when the notes seemed to chase each other, and quieter passages that felt like secrets being shared. I sat transfixed, my heart in my throat, but as I glanced around, I realized that the magic I was hearing wasn't connecting with the audience. A couple in the back row were checking their phones. The Miller family was whispering among themselves. One of the judges, the music teacher from the middle school, was making notes without looking up. That's when I heard that whisper. "That's the poor girl, the one with the single mom. Chen, I think." And then another voice. "Is she even playing a real piece? It sounds strange." I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. I wanted to turn around, to defend her, to make them really listen, but I couldn't move. On stage, Melody continued playing, pouring herself into every note as if someone might hear what she was really saying. Her final chord hung in the air, unresolved and questioning, before fading to nothing. Then came that terrible silence. Melody held her bow position for a moment before lowering the violin. She bowed as we'd practiced, her eyes searching the crowd for reaction. Finding none, she began to retreat from the stage, her shoulders curving inward. I was about to stand, to offer the applause no one else would give, when a movement at the back of the auditorium caught my eye. A woman was standing up, tall, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple charcoal blazer. She wasn't clapping, not yet, but she was moving purposefully down the aisle toward the stage. People turned to look. One of the judges, a younger man with a neat beard who taught band at the high school, straightened in his seat. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice carrying without being loud. "I'd like to say something, if I may." The host, Mrs. Palmer, looked flustered. This wasn't in the program. Well, we still have several performers. It will only take a moment," the woman said, already at the steps to the stage. There was something in her manner that made people listen. Not forceful exactly, but certain. Mrs. Palmer glanced at the other judges, then reluctantly handed over the microphone. The woman turned to face the audience. "My name is Dr. Eleanor Wright. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. I'm here as a guest of Principal Evans, observing for the Northwest Young Artists Initiative." She paused, her eyes finding Melody, who had frozen at the edge of the stage. "But I feel compelled to comment on what we just heard." The auditorium had gone completely still. Even the restless children seemed to sense something important was happening. What this young lady just played wasn't just music. It was composition. Original composition with a depth of emotion I rarely hear from musicians 3 times her age. She turned slightly toward the judges' table. "I understand that in competitions like this, we often look for technical precision or familiar pieces executed well. But what we just witnessed was something different. It was authentic creative expression." I saw one of the judges, the middle school music teacher, shift uncomfortably in her seat. Mrs. Bennett, sitting a few rows ahead of me, was nodding slightly. Dr. Wright continued, "I don't know this student or her training background, but I'd like to—" She turned to Melody. "Would you tell us your name?" "Melody Chen," my daughter said, so quietly that I barely heard her. "Melody," Dr. Wright repeated. "That piece you played, did you compose it yourself?" Melody nodded. "How long have you been playing violin?" "Since Christmas," Melody said. "About 5 months." A murmur went through the crowd. 5 months was nothing in the world of musical training. Dr. Wright raised an eyebrow. 5 months. And you've had lessons for how long? "I haven't. Just YouTube and some help from Mrs. Bennett sometimes." The murmur grew louder. I saw Mrs. Miller lean over to whisper something to her husband. "Would you play it again?" Dr. Wright asked. "Perhaps with a small adjustment. Focus on the middle section, the part that feels like the water is picking up speed. Try to let go a little more there." Melody glanced at me, uncertain. I nodded encouragement, though my own heart was racing with confusion and hope. She raised her violin again and began to play. This time something was different. Knowing someone was actually listening, really listening, seemed to free something in her. The notes came more confidently, and when she reached the part Dr. Wright had mentioned, she closed her eyes and let the music flow faster, wilder. When she finished, there was another moment of silence, but different this time, charged with something new. Then Dr. Wright began to applaud, a deliberate, appreciative sound. After a moment, Mrs. Bennet joined in, then the band teacher, then scattered audience members, until most of the auditorium was applauding. Not the thunderous ovation that Aidan Miller had received, but solid, genuine recognition. Melody's face transformed, not with pride exactly, but with relief, the look of someone who has finally been understood. Dr. Wright handed the microphone back to Mrs. Palmer. "Thank you," she said simply, then returned to her seat, while the host, looking somewhat bewildered, called the next performer. Melody made her way back to our seats, her steps lighter than before. When she sat down beside me, I squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. "She heard it, Mom," Melody whispered back. She actually heard what I was trying to say. We stayed for the rest of the performances. Aidan Miller won first place. To no one's surprise, Melody received an honorable mention, which the judges announced with slightly embarrassed glances toward Dr. Wright. As people began to file out after the awards, I noticed Dr. Wright making her way toward us. "Mrs. Chen," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor Wright. I hope you don't mind my intervention earlier." "Not at all," I said, shaking her hand. "Thank you for what you said. It meant a lot to Melody." "Your daughter has something special," she said, not as flattery but as simple fact. "Raw talent, certainly, but more importantly, she has something to say. That can't be taught." Melody was standing partly behind me, one hand still holding her violin case. Dr. Wright addressed her directly, bending slightly to meet her eyes. "Melody, how would you feel about developing your composition skills further?" "I'd like that," Melody said softly, "but we can't really—" "The Northwest Young Artists Initiative sponsors weekend workshops in Portland," Dr. Wright continued, glancing at me. "We focus on young musicians from diverse backgrounds who might not have access to traditional training paths. There's no cost to families. It's grant-funded." She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a business card. "We have a spring session starting in 2 weeks. It's just Saturday mornings, and we can help arrange transportation if that's an issue." I took the card, trying to process what she was saying. "That's incredibly generous. But why? Because talent deserves nurturing, wherever it comes from," she said simply. "And because music needs diverse voices to stay alive." She smiled. "Also, selfishly, because I'd like to hear what she creates next." On the drive home, Melody was quiet, staring out the window at the darkening sky. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, did you know that lady was going to be there?" "No, sweetie. I knew someone from a music school might be coming, but that's all. Ms. Larson had mentioned it, remember?" She nodded, then after another pause, "Do you think I can really go to those workshops?" I thought about the logistics, the drive to Portland, arranging my Saturday shifts, gas money. But then I thought about Melody's face when Dr. Wright had really listened to her music. "Yes," I said, "we'll make it work." That was 4 months ago. Now Melody attends the Northwest Young Artists Workshop every Saturday morning. I rearranged my schedule to work Sunday doubles instead, and we make the hour-long drive to Portland each week, leaving before dawn. It hasn't been a fairy tale transformation. Some weeks are harder than others. The other students come from various backgrounds, but many have had formal training that Melody is still catching up on. Theory lessons can be frustrating for her. Gas prices make the weekly drive a careful calculation in our budget. But there are moments that make it all worthwhile. Last month, one of the instructors, a cellist with the Portland Symphony, asked to record Melody's latest composition to use as an example in her university class. 2 weeks ago, another student asked Melody to collaborate on a piece they're writing. And sometimes, when I watch her sitting with her violin, eyes closed as she works through a difficult passage, I see a confidence that wasn't there before. Not because someone made her instantly famous or solved all our problems, but because someone took the time to really see her. Melody still plays the river. That first composition no one applauded, but she plays it differently now. Not louder or faster, just more assured, like she knows its worth, even if not everyone can hear it. As for me, I've learned something too. For years, I thought my job was to help Melody fit in, to protect her from standing out too much in a world that can be unkind to those who are different. I was wrong. What she needed wasn't protection from being seen. It was the courage to be seen for who she truly is. The other day, I overheard her talking to another student at the workshop. "Music isn't about impressing people," she said. "It's about finding the people who hear what you're trying to say." Sometimes I think about that silence after Melody's performance, how it almost convinced her that her voice didn't matter. And I think about Dr. Wright, who could have stayed silent, but chose to speak. It reminds me that recognition isn't always about grand gestures or overnight success stories. Sometimes it's just one person saying, "I hear you. You belong here too." That might be the most important thing any of us can ever hear.